I still remember the day she walked into my life. Quietly, politely, almost invisible, wearing a dull beige scarf, holding her hands tightly in front of her, eyes lowered, her voice no louder than a whisper when she said, "Ma'am, I'll do my best," and I simply nodded, barely glancing at her as I turned away, because to me she was just another maid, one in a long line of helpers that came and went, scrubbing the floors, folding the towels, dusting memories off picture frames. I didn't even bother to ask her name at first, just left a list on the kitchen counter and went off to my meetings and phone calls and pretend important brunches with women who barely knew me. But over time, she became a fixture, reliable, never late, never complained, never asked for anything extra even when I knew I was making her do more than I paid her for, and it was only after a year that I began to notice little things. The way she would linger a second longer in my daughter's room, smoothing the sheets with a kind of tenderness I had forgotten even existed, or how she would sometimes pause near the piano, her fingers brushing the keys like she knew the songs once, long ago, but was afraid to play them again. There was something in her silence that started to unsettle me, not because it was cold, but because it held a story, and I had no idea how heavy that story was until the day I came home early from work. It was raining heavily, and I'd forgotten my phone charger, and as I stepped inside the house quietly, I heard a voice, soft and trembling, singing a lullaby I hadn't heard in years, the same one I used to sing to my daughter when she was little, and I followed the sound like a ghost, creeping down the hallway, and there she was, sitting on the edge of my daughter's bed, holding her favorite stuffed bunny, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "You would have been 6 today." I froze, and for a long moment, I didn't know what to do, whether to back away or confront her, but something in her voice kept me rooted, and I stepped in slowly, gently asking, "Whose birthday is it?" She looked up at me, panic flooding her face, scrambling to her feet, apologizing over and over, but I held her arm and said again, "Whose birthday is it?" And she crumbled, like a wall finally giving in to 1,000 storms, falling to her knees, holding her scarf like it was a lifeline, and she told me everything about the little girl she lost in a fire in another city, the fire that took not just her child but her voice, her laughter, her entire self, and how she had been living in shelters and abandoned buildings until she found her way to our town and begged the agency for work. She never told anyone she used to be a music teacher, or that she once played piano for orphan children, or that she could sing so beautifully that her daughter would fall asleep smiling even on her hungriest nights. All she had left of that life was the stuffed bunny that her daughter clutched the night she died, the same bunny my daughter had pulled out from a forgotten donation box and made her favorite without knowing the story behind it. I sat with her for hours that evening, hearing more about loss and motherhood and strength than I had in my entire privileged life, and I didn't say a word when she told me my husband had once scolded her for accidentally breaking a glass, or how my daughter had hugged her after a nightmare and she had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing. I realized then that this woman had been mourning beside me all these years, and I never saw it, too blinded by my own grief, my own ego, too busy performing life rather than living it. I offered her a chair at the table that night, and though she refused, saying it wasn't her place, I set a plate for her anyway, and from that day forward, I stopped calling her the maid and started calling her Mina, her real name, the name of a mother, a musician, a woman whose love had no place to go until she found us. And slowly, everything changed. She began teaching my daughter piano, her fingers dancing across the keys again, not with the sorrow of the past, but with the hope of passing something forward, and I watched as she slowly came back to life. Not all at once, but in gentle waves. I didn't know healing could look like folding laundry together in silence, or sipping tea on rainy afternoons, or planting flowers in a backyard that once only grew weeds, but it did, and over time, she became part of our family, not because we gave her anything, but because we finally saw her, really saw her, and 3 years after that rainy afternoon, when my daughter stood on stage at her school recital and said, "This one's for my piano teacher, my other mom," I cried harder than I ever had before because I realized that love doesn't always come wrapped in titles or bloodlines. Sometimes it walks in quietly, with calloused hands and tired eyes, and gives your life a second chance without asking for one in return. And just this morning, I found an old letter tucked into the back of the piano, written in Mina's handwriting, that simply said, "Thank you for letting me live again."